Okay, let's review various ways of laying out your page using tables and AP divs and a combination thereof. And also let's look at a couple of other things that you can add to your pages as well, like the date that it was modified or things like that. Okie doke. So at the moment I have a simple page, resume, and I have my links that I created as a when I created that little shell website. And when you add this, notice that it automatically creates a div. It's not an AP div, meaning I can't move this around. It's just a frame that contains it. So the data. So my only choice for each of these for placement is centered, flush left or flush right. And that's pretty much it. Those are your choices. No more, no less. So instead, let's decide to take some content and move it around, and decide where we want to put some of this stuff. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to take this div and I'm going to remove it. So everything is gone now. What we can do, and there's a variety of ways of doing this. Let me go back to my common layers. Let's say I want to step it up just a little bit and organize it based on a very simple grid. The way I can do that is to insert a table. With the common tools visible, I can click on the table button. It brings up the dialog box, and I can determine from here how many rows I want, how many columns. I can determine the table width in pixels, or remember, I can also specify it in a percentage. Everybody understand the difference? Pixels are fixed. The percentage will always be a percentage of the browser width. So if I say that it's 75% of the browser width, no matter how big or how small the browser width is, that's how big my page is going to be, 75% of that. Yes? It depends. If it's a very simple layout and it lends itself to being expanded or contracted, then percentage can be nice. Because if someone has a large monitor and they stretch it to fit, it looks presentable. On the other hand, if they have a small monitor, then it contracts to fit the size of that monitor. I find it kind of rare, though, that it looks equally good on both. So my preference is that I like to have a fixed table size. And I push it in the upper left-hand corner usually, rather than have it centered, so that it forces the viewer just to change the browser window to fit the size of my page size. And if it's 800 by 600 or whatever, then that's the size that it is. And then it remains pretty constant, pretty consistent from page to page. Again, my goal when I design is that it looks as close to print as possible. And I think if I had started with web design and not with print, I would be thinking differently. But because I started in print, then that's sort of how my mind works, and it's hard to break from that. That's why, and I believe he even mentioned it in one of the videos, Kirk, that it's been really frustrating for designers for a long time, because most designers start with print. And then you come to the web and you think, okay, I've laid this out, traditional techniques, or even using InDesign or Quark so that it's desktop publishing, or Photoshop or Illustrator, and you're expecting it to be somewhat the same, and it's totally different. You have almost no control, or limited control. Even with all of these tools, it's not the same degree of control that you have using the other techniques. So you try to get close, and you will get very close, but it's a struggle to get there, to what you have done in print. So my choice is 700. I don't like, since we're using the table today to lay out our page, I don't like seeing the border thickness. I don't like seeing the rows and the columns and individual cells. And again, that's a choice. It relates too to the kind of frames that you use when you make a piece of art. From my perspective, the frame has to have meaning. It has to be part of the meaning of the artwork. To just randomly put any kind of frame on there because it sort of looks nice doesn't make any sense to me. And sometimes frames just kind of redefine the borders of your page, and it's like, well, okay, then why do that? You know, you just don't need it. The corners of the paper do that. And again, that's my bias. You know, some people like to really define it cleanly. So for the time being, though, I'll leave it 1 for the moment so you can take a look at it. And then headers, because I'm using this for layout, I'm laying out my page. We really don't need a header here. So I'm going to leave it none. But if you recall in the Garrett Chow video, when he was doing the T-Cloud product piece, and it said this is the T-Cloud teapots or whatever it was, then maybe you do want a header. And it had to do, too, with the way he laid it out, using cascading style sheets and defining backgrounds and the type that he used for the headers and that sort of thing. It was easier to lay out and to define the CSS styles by using that. But for just laying out your page, you don't need it. And this is where you would have the caption, and it would have a summary. Default, we'll use default for alignment. I'm sorry, that's align caption, yeah. Caption we don't need. Since we don't have a caption, we don't have the default. I mean, default means nothing to us. And if you want, you can put a summary in here too, but we don't need any of that for what we're doing for layout. I'm just going to leave 4, well, I'll put it 3 by 3 because 3 by 3 usually is the default. And I click, and there it goes. And as you can see, it now the table as a whole follows under the same limited structure in terms of layout as your type did before. Notice it's flush left. Alignment here, it says if I select the table, entire table, align, it says default. Well, default happens to be left. But what if I say centered? Now it will always be the center of your page, or right. So now it will always be the right of your page. So no matter how large or how small I make the browser window, it will be in one of those 3 positions. So I'm just going to make it left for the time being. Now I can come in any one of these cells, it doesn't matter which one, and I can paste that content that I had in there before. Command V to paste, and there it is. So let's say I decide that I want the resume to be in the upper left-hand corner, that I decided that that's where the title of all of my pages are going to be. Just leave it in that cell. I can cut, Command X, the links from that cell, and I can go ahead maybe down in the middle, down here, bottom middle, and I can paste, and I can put it back in. Now notice as I'm cutting and pasting, the cells shrink and expand to fit the content. And that's just, that will frustrate you. Boy, when I was learning it, when Dreamweaver 1, it just drove me nuts. Because I was expecting it to be like Quark or something. And I just was on sabbatical leave when I was learning it, and 12 years ago, and it was just driving me nuts. It took me forever to lay out, and because I wanted to look just like the printed document that I was modeling it after.
So vertically, every row is affected by
Yeah. By whatever, if I have something, whatever the largest piece of data you have in a cell will determine how it stretches or contracts, or smallest determines how, usually the largest will determine how big it gets. And if there is nothing in it, then it just collapses. So for example, look at how all of these cells to the right in the right column are contracted. But if I look over here and I look at that, I'm going to use the my famous Duck Dunes JPEG, and I'll drag it right in here in this center one over to the right, and watch how it changes everything. I'm not going to add an alt tag here, but I recommend that you do. Click OK. Notice how it pushed everything over. It filled that content and it made it flush left in here. So with this selected, I can also adjust the alignment of it within the cell. Its alignment is default, which is flush left. But what if I want it centered or absolute middle? Okay, so no matter how big or small I make it, it will be absolute middle. If I click behind it, you'll notice that there's also that factor too. I have flush left, centered, and right. And when I click centered, it is absolutely in the center of this cell now. So now if I go to preview this in the browser, preview in Firefox, and I'll go ahead and save it. And let's hope it doesn't crash. There you go. So notice that the table is shoved up in the left-hand corner. It will always stay there. It doesn't matter. It's fixed. And notice, as big or as small as this gets, notice that this cell here remains in the center. You can. I would be careful when you do that, because they're not linked together, and if you're assuming things will be aligned from one table to another, I tried that in the past, it doesn't work. They can be off just a little bit and you'll notice it. Yep. Because remember, it just has to be off by a pixel and you will see that. The alignment will be off. So I would keep it all within one table. And if it's really complicated, then you might want to use the other technique that we're going to use, which is go into layout mode, build a general table, and then build your cells inside it. But there's no guarantee. All the left columns will align, but again, depending on how many columns you have over here, they won't necessarily align, depending on the content, because remember, they stretch and they contract depending on the content. Now watch how the right column, when I select, I'm in the browser. When I cut from here and I paste it in the center, watch how the right column contracts and the center one expands. So I'll cut, let's get rid of this div, and I'll click in the middle. Notice how everything contracted when it went away. Now I'll paste inside. And notice how the right now contracts and the middle expands. Bizarre, huh? Now you can also, depending on your layout, if you decide, well, I really don't need this column anymore to the right, it serves no purpose, you can get rid of it. If I decide at the bottom that I just have these links and I really don't need the cell to the left or the cell to the right, I can click and drag these to highlight them, or I can deselect and I can move over the edge, as Garrett pointed out, and click there, and that selects the table row. Or I can click in here and you'll see at the bottom where it says TR, that stands for table row. I can select it from there. So there's 3 different ways of doing that. The same with the column. I can click up here and click and drag, and you'll see that all 3 are selected. I can deselect, I can click again and then move up here. And when you see the little arrow, see how the entire column is selected. Okay. But what I can do at the bottom is if I select these 3, there's a little widget down here under row. It allows me to merge all of those cells. Now notice it made it all flush left, but if I click here and now I make it centered, if I just click anywhere in that cell and then click centered, it will always be in the middle or centered in the middle of my table. And likewise, if I decide, you know, I really didn't need this anymore, so I'll select this and I'll remove those too. And they're gone. Okay. Now you have a basic layout. And if I wanted my links, my buttons over here, I could. And if on other pages I wanted to put, instead of an image, I wanted to put my Flash project, or if I wanted to put text. It's a basic structure that holds these elements together in the various parts loosely. Okay. So that's, and again, if you decide, let's go ahead and preview it in the browser again. I personally think the table looks pretty unsightly. On the other hand, if you wanted to add a decorative property to it, maybe you could change the background color in each cell, and it could look sort of interesting, kind of like a Mondrian painting or something. You know, that would be okay. But if you just want all of these to be held in place and not see the underlying frame, then what we have to do is come back, select the table, and where it says border 1, you do have to put in 0 and then hit the tab key. And what you will see now is you'll see where the cells are divided, but it's in a little dotted line, and so that isn't visible when we preview it in the browser. So now when I go to preview it again, we'll save changes. Once everything is held into place, but you don't see that framework anymore. Now, when Kirk did the little product piece, maybe seeing the framework helps, because it helps. You know, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends. I find the borders to be kind of horsey, overbearing, kind of cumbersome. I would want them to be a little bit more delicate, but you just can't make them any smaller than 1 pixel. So is he differentiated rows by making them different colors? Maybe that would be adequate. You know, the background's different colors. Maybe that would be adequate to differentiate one row from another, or one column from another, or something like that. That would be sufficient. There are other ways of creating visual cues for the viewer rather than putting a border around it. Okay, you want to try another one? Okay, let's try something a little bit different now. I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to put all of this together now. Yeah, just put it all in the same cell. See how it all collapses when you remove it? Uh-huh. Say again? It depends on how you want it laid out. Whether you want it top, middle, bottom, left, right. It will always be at the top of that cell. Top just means it'll always be at the top of the cell. Huh? No. Oh, wait. Say again. I'm probably not hearing you correctly. This is when you wanted to build a new table from here? Yeah. When you're saying what? If you were going to This has to do with the header. If I create a header here, and I want the caption to be just like he did, T-Cloud, Teapots. Okay, and I click OK. And I scroll, I don't want it there, so let's go ahead and remove this table. Come on. See how it says T-Cloud Teapots? That's where the header is. When you're laying out a page, you don't need a header. This only works if you're going to create a table that's used to contain data of some sort, similar to a spreadsheet. If you're going to use it for a spreadsheet, then you can have the header to the left, or you can have a combination of headers. And you'll notice at the top, this header, it lies out. It appears to lie outside of the table itself. Does that make sense? So it's used for a different purpose. We can use tables as like a spreadsheet, or more to the point, what we're focusing on is we're using tables as a way to structure your page. And that was something, as Kirk said in the videos, that happened sort of by chance. That they weren't designed to lay out pages, but people realized, oh, it's a way to structure the contents. If I can do it for my product list, why not be able to put other elements in here and structure it? And it's pretty much stayed for a long time, and it's a safe way to work because it's compatible with all browsers. No, divs do. AP divs do. So let's take that as the next step. That, again, I don't have a sample, but if I had a background image, and I'm using that as a tracing image, then I would go ahead and I could use AP divs to lay out my page, and then I could collapse it to a table. And that's not a bad way to work either that he doesn't talk about. It's a very effective way to work. Okay, I find that to be the closest to working with print, in the same as working in print. So how do you do that? What I'll do is I come up to Layout, and I look at this button right here. It says Drop AP Div. It's the second over from where it says Extended, right here, AP Div. And I can draw that any size I like, and I can use my, roll over the edge here, and I can use my grid and have it snap to the grid and decide, well, this is, the size that I need it. And it will tell you when it's selected. Notice how it says AP Div 1, and it does add it to our CSS styles. But remember, this CSS style is only for this page. It's not until you export it, or what do they call it? No, something else. Oh, I'm looking at something else. There we go. If I select this style, and I click here, move. There we go. It's not export anymore, it's move. Okay. And if I click on the tab, notice that when my mouse rolls over the tab, I can move this any place I like and use this as a guide now to build my page. And if I decide I'll go ahead and click, because I had all those elements pasted into one. So if I click like so, it put everything in there. That's not what I want. But you'll see in a minute, I'll go ahead and I'll highlight this, and I'm going to cut this, and then I'm going to create another AP div. I'm trying to just save the content. This is very crude the way I'm doing this. And I'll click and I'll drag another one like so. And I'll click inside it where I see the cursor, and I paste that resume inside there. And I'm going to select the individual links and cut them from there. and create another AP div and click inside it and paste inside that. And now what I can do is I can click on the edge and I can resize these to minimize them. Now notice if I move it too much, too far, it goes over. Notice how it scrolls to the next page. I don't like that. You can click in here and maybe center it within here. That's not a bad idea. The same here. Click on the edge, resize it so it's small. And maybe even within this, have it centered within here. Let's go ahead and resize this. I have a div in here, and why that's in there, I don't know. Let's go ahead and resize this. Come on. Won't do it. Oh, I know what I did. Oh, shoot. Shoot, shoot, shoot. I'm going to click this. I'm going to cut it. I have a div in here. So I'm going to take this and delete it. And I'm going to create another AP div. Like so. And even if it's too small, when I click inside and I paste the contents, it will stretch to fit. And if I can make it larger if I, shoot. Okay. You don't want to do that. I have a div in here. So I guess I could come in here. Div AP, div ID, div align center. I think we'll find out in a minute. That's that's the AP div. Here's the other div. I think this one, this div align center, href index HTML. How about if I select this one? Is that one? That one, that one, that one. I copied the wrong thing. You know what? I'm just going to delete it again. The whole shooting match. I'm trying to make things simple and I'm making them hard. I'm just going to take from here and drag it in here. There we go. That's what I want. So now I can grab by the handle and I can move this wherever I like. If I want to place this again centered. If I decide that I want to move this in the upper left hand corner and align it. Oh, come on. Click and drag. There we go. And again, maybe I want the bottom to, maybe I need to move this up a tad. You can click on here. Oh, it did it for there too. Okay, maybe that's correct. That's supposed to be. I'm using my arrow keys to move it up. Select the tab on this one and center it. Again, maybe use my arrow keys to move it over and to line it. Okay, and if I'm happy with the position of this, and I could conceivably leave it as is. Mm-hmm.
Is there a way that the AP divs can kind of function that makes them flush to the text or to the image without you like arbitrarily moving it? Okay.
No. That's why you need to use the grids, the snap feature, and you need to pay close attention at when you select them and when you're moving them to their position, the left and top position. And you can come in here and I can specify, okay, I want all of these to line up. So from the left, I want all of them to be 250 pixels over. Now the contents within that, they may look like they line up, but you need to be careful. They may or may not. Okay. Now, if I'm content with this and I want to go ahead and build a table off of it, I can. So to do that, I can go up to Modify, Convert, and I can select AP Divs to Table. And just by doing that, it will bring up a little dialog box. I like most accurate and also use transparent GIFs. so to create them if necessary, and click OK. And there it did. It made a table for me. I would be very careful about modifying this table afterwards. It could alter the structure of it considerably because it's putting those transparent GIFs in cells where they're absolutely needed. Now, one place that might be pretty safe would be, what if I decided to add another link down at the bottom here, and I needed more space? The only way I can do that is click in here, and if I hit the space bar and I'll say, okay, I want to put in Kmart 66. Notice it drops down to a new line. There wasn't any more room in that cell. It was fixed. But what I can do is I can click and drag and highlight these three, and I can merge them. The reason I feel it's safe to merge them is look at what's directly above it, the duck photograph. The duck photograph is what's holding that apart. If there wasn't anything there, it could conceivably collapse or alter it in some way. But I feel pretty confident that it will be okay. How are you going to know this? You're going to have to try it and go, oh shoot, what did I do? And then go back and revise it. Now, that looks that way. Notice how it expanded to fit that? But now, let's go ahead and preview it in the browser, and you'll see how it contracts again to fit. So let's preview in Firefox, save the changes. And actually it did. It left it, it did center it over, huh? Because, oh, I know why, because I said I wanted this to be the center of the cell. Remember how I wanted that? So it did, it goofed it up. If I wanted these to be directly underneath this, then I messed up. So what I could do is I could go back.
Does it take into consideration that the GIFs that are placed there, the transparent GIFs?
They're in there, and I don't know where they're at.
So when
You would have to hunt around for them. So
when you collapse the cells there, does it take into consideration that? Maybe that's why it...
I don't know what it does, to be quite honest. To me, it's kind of magic. And you could go back in and you can hunt around within that cell and see where the GIFs are, because they will be placed in there. Because if I make this now flush left, see now it's still not centered in here. I mean, I could move it over artificially, but it looks wonky. It'll look wonky. And if you want to start over, that's not a big deal either, because remember, we can look at our CSS. I want to look at the AP. I don't have any AP divs, AP elements. So what I'll do is I'll select the table, and I'll convert it back to a table. Move the elements around again, and then collapse it to a table. But remember that when you do that, you will have additional you'll have additional divs that you don't want, because it's creating them for all of those transparent GIFs. So I can go back to modify, and I can select convert tables to AP divs. And again, prevent no overlaps, show AP elements panel, show grid, snap to grid, leave all that on. See, I started with what, 3? Now I have how many? So now I can select these. See how there are these little extra ones? And select them and then just delete them. Select them, delete them. Select them, these extra ones, delete them. All these little bitty things that they use to hold them in place. Now here's this one that I can now resize so that it matches the width of this. Click in here, center it. So now it matches the center of this. So now collapse it to a table again.
Would you just be able to publish it as it is right now with the AP divs?
Yeah, you could.
What was
The advantage, again, at browser compatibility, and I would probably test it in different browsers to see and make sure that the alignments or what they are supposed to be. All you can do is test it. And I don't know all the browsers well enough to say what they can and can't do. And that can be surprising. You'll look at something for the longest time in Firefox, and then you'll try it in Safari, and then you'll look at it in a new version of Internet Explorer. And then you'll look at it in a version, 2 versions ago of Internet Explorer, and it looks different. You know, what changed? You know, I don't know. There's, you know, you really have to be up on those things to know why. The safest one is the table. So, you know, the safest, rather than leave it as AP divs, because I can preview this as is. And I can save it, and it's fixed position. I can leave it just this way. And this is going to be fixed. It's not moving anywhere. But for browser compatibility, old browsers and whatever browsers you want someone is using, tables are more compatible and safer. So the next option for us is to use, we can use a combination of divs and tables. Okay, as he did. So I could select in here, and I can put a table inside the div if I want. That will work. I can also, what would be my other option? I can also use layout mode. Okay, and I'm still creating a table, but I'm creating the table based on the content that I've already designed. So let's do that. Instead of the resume page, let's open up another page. Let's say my portfolio page. So I have this. And again, I'm just going to highlight this. Actually, I'm going to get rid of this. I just want to keep the links. I don't want to have to recreate them. So Command X, and then remove this div. Now let's go to View, and let's look at tables. Where is it? Table mode. I want to look at it in layout mode. And it gives me this warning. Okay. And now when I switch, and notice that it switched the tab from common to layout. And I'm really going to start using these over here. Here I'm going to start by drawing a table. And I can create the table wherever I want. I can click and drag. So this is the size of my table. And it says layout table. And now within the table I can begin to draw cells. So what I'll do now is I'll click on here. And if I decide, okay, I wanted, again, to mirror the same layout I had before, I click and I drag. And there is a cell where I will put about. Okay, so I'll type about, or isn't that my about? Or no, this is my portfolio page. Portfolio, or I can put an image or whatever. But if I put an image, you need to know the size of the image so I can determine the size of the cell here. It tells me that it's fixed, and it tells me the width, and it tells me the height of that cell. But if my image is different than that, it's going to change the structure of this. So I have to have an idea ahead of time of how big those elements are. Because I can go ahead and I can move this over, right? And I can move this over now because there's no content in there. And I can highlight this, and because I'm using CSS styles, I can put that in there and make it bold, and go ahead, and I only need it to be maybe this wide. And again, I want the content in here to be centered in here. Now I need to create a cell for my for my image that I wanted to put in here. So again, I'll create the little cell, and maybe I want it to be centered, or I'm not sure. I want to create it like so. I can drag it anywhere I like. I can click on here and I can move it up a little bit, so maybe it snaps with that. Maybe down just a little bit. And let's move it over a little bit, like so, like so. Okay, and now I'll take the duck image again and I'll drag it in here. Now it stretched it to fit the size of the image. Now if I wish to put my links down below, I can again select the cell. I can click in here and click another and drag like so. Makes another cell, and I can paste what I had in there, and I can make it centered within there, so it's centered within that. And as I'm dragging and making those cells, notice that it draws these white lines and it creates a grid all the way through the table. And now let's see if it looks close to what I had envisioned it. I can go out of this mode, so we can go back to view, and we can switch from table, where was it? Table mode, standard mode, and there's the table I've created. So that's another way to work. Which way is better? I don't know. Whichever way works for you. Part of it, I think, will be the kind of layout you have. That will determine what you're going to do. And after that, it will really depend on what you feel comfortable with. They just keep giving you more tools and giving you more options. Has anybody ever? Do any of you watch the Yankee Workshop or whatever it is? Have you ever seen that show? Yeah, Norm Abrams, funny guy that lives in Vermont or somewhere. Master craftsman. Have you ever taken note of all the tools he has in his shop? Which tool would you use? I don't know. He's got a gazillion tools that do the same thing, but I guess everyone is depending on his habits or what he's done, he might decide that one is better suits his needs than another one. It's when I teach the 3D modeling class, there's all these tools. Which approach is better? Some approaches are better than others, and you discover that through experience, that maybe organic modeling techniques work better than Boolean, but in other situations, maybe Boolean is that's the right choice for what you want to do. But there's lots and lots of options, and you can achieve the same result 3 or 4 different ways. They always give you lots of options. And these programs, as they get more and more complex and more sophisticated, that's part of what makes it difficult to learn them now, is that you do have so many options at your fingertips, and which is better. And all I can say is the more you do and the more you experiment with the tools, the more you will determine for yourself which workflow works better for you. Because I've had a number of people use this last way. They like it the best. Where they start with a layout tape. They work in layout, and they have a tracing image, and they build the initial table, and then they build the cells within that, and then paste the contents in there. But they already know where all of the cells are going to be based on the layout that they generated in Photoshop. So, for example, let me open Photoshop, and there is an exercise, if any of you are so inclined, to lay out a really nice page in Photoshop with rollover, buttons and all sorts of stuff. And it's graphically very rich, and that's the approach that I like, meaning that you have something visually that's really stunning. Let me go ahead and open this. Open. I gotta find. Come on. There we go. Okay. desktop, oh, I know where it is, never mind. Let's go to my content. Yeah, my content, it's my public folder, and it's Photoshop Lessons, PS3. And if I remember correctly, it's 12. Here goes. Home, yep, okay. So let's look at the, I'm going to look at the very finished product. And you can see the page that was laid out in Photoshop. Here's our home page. Okay? Graphically rich, right? But it's broken down into lots of different parts. If I look at this in layers, and actually we should actually look at the site so you can see, let me open up the final product as well. I'm going to go to my browser, and I have Firefox open. I'm going to go File, Open File, and we can construct an HTML page directly from here. So what I'm going to do from Photoshop. But this is for another day, but I'm showing you the finished product. So let me go back to Miller. Let's look inside Public. Let's look inside Photoshop Lessons, and let's look inside 12, and let's look inside End, and let's look inside the site. Okay, so here we have inside the site, we have About HTML, we have our Tour HTML, we have lots of them. Here's the home one that you're looking at right now. Notice a little animation. That's a little animated GIF. Notice that we roll over. Here are links. We roll over here. We can go to and view individual elements. Pretty cool, huh? If I click on the tour page, it takes me to the tour page. And notice how it seamlessly seems the same because the background matches and they're all in it. It's all done with tables. If I go back to Museo Art, it takes me back to my home page. All of this was done in Photoshop. So, going through this whole exercise, and they give you all the elements, they give you all the ingredients to put this together. And you follow the steps to lay all of these elements out on different layers. That's how it's done. Then what you're able to do here, we're able to connect the links and everything in here. That what we do is, you may or may not have noticed before, is that when we go File, Save for Web and Devices, we have some choices. You'll notice that this is now broken down into slices. If you've ever wondered what that X-Acto knife is in Photoshop, that's what it does. It slices across, just like we have done in Dreamweaver, and it's cutting it up, a table up into smaller cells and elements. So that you can see that we need a separate slice for each of the links, for each of the buttons, which separate it from the animated logo, which separate it from the header, which separate it from the images that I have over here. So that the layout sort of determines how many slices you need. Never, never, never just use one big image. It will take too long to download. Smaller images, a collection of smaller images download much faster than one big one. Now when I'm ready to save this, watch what I have for options. It's going to name it Home JPEG, but notice that I have the format options. It's going to name it Images Only. Okay? I have a choice. Do I want to select all slices or selected slices? So I can only, if I make a change to an individual slice, I can, or if I want to select all of them, or save all of them. I also have the option too of HTML and images, and this is what I would do the first time. It's going to save my HTML page that I can open in Dreamweaver, and it will save all of the images in a folder. Everything ready for me to go. So now when I select save, and I would save it in my root folder, I'm set to go. So watch, when I save this one page, it probably will not save all the other pages and documents, and I'm going to get broken links. So I don't have to try hard. I'm probably going to goof up with this. But I want to show you that the difficulty with this, if you don't save images in the right, or save your files in the right place. So I'm going to go ahead and select save. Oh, I didn't want to do that. File. Save for web and devices. Let me go ahead and save again. I don't want to save it there. I wanted to save it on the desktop in my root folder. So let's go back to the desktop. I knew I would screw up, but not that way. There's Lauren Miller 2. That's my root folder. Let's go ahead and save it in there. And when I save it, it will save all slices, and it will save, you know, HTML and images. Boom. Now I can go back to Dreamweaver. Let's go ahead and just quit Photoshop for right now, so I don't get confused. It's for my benefit, so I don't get confused with all that's going on here. Now, with Dreamweaver open, let's look at pages, and you can see I have in here my index page, and there will be a home page in here. Here's that home page that I just saved. And let's open it. It's complete. Look at that. That's what it looks like at that size. Let's look at it, just design mode. That's what it looks like. Now, notice that the links don't work. I have to preview it in the browser for it to work. So let's go ahead and go to preview in Firefox. Notice, oh shoot, there we go. Notice how the little, even if I refresh it, see the little animation. Now if I roll over, I get the finger, I get the links. If I roll over here, I get the links. If I click here, file not found. That's exactly what I thought. I saved that page. I saved the contents of that page, but all of the files that were linked to it were not saved, and they're not in the relative location that they're supposed to be. So you need to be very careful where you place those things, or if you're, if you're not consistent and you're not methodical about it, when you're done, you're going to have lots of broken links. But conceivably, or not conceivably, but if you feel really comfortable with Photoshop, you can design your entire web page in there, throw it in your Dreamweaver root folder, and open it up, and you're done. That's what Fireworks was designed to do. Exactly what we're doing here in Photoshop. And it probably does it better. That's why Adobe, when they bought Macromedia, kept it. It was Macromedia, Fireworks was Macromedia's answer to Photoshop, but because Macromedia was devoted mostly to designing for the web, they designed it with that in mind. But you'll notice that in the table, you can, depending on the browser, it shoves it in the upper left-hand corner. It's not centered, and you'll notice that my default background is white. Can you live with that? That's the downside to doing that, I think. That you don't want to see this unsightly white out here. However, maybe there is a color that was used in here that you can use that would help blend with that would help blur the edges a little bit, so that when someone expands the border using, increasing the size of the browser window, that it will still look complete. You can also select a table and decide, well, I want it centered, so that no matter how big or how small someone makes the browser window, it will always be centered. That would be an option too. But this is the kind of website that I had in mind when I developed this class. Because at the time when web design was starting, and I don't think it's all that different, as it typically, for companies, the print comes first. That's not necessarily true anymore. Oftentimes the web comes first. For large companies, though, for startups, you know, that are especially in the tech industry, most of it is on the web. But for people who make widgets, people who make things, provide services where people, you know, you're in an office and people come in, oftentimes the things that you develop first are in print, like your business card. And the business card has to work with the letterhead and the envelope, and that has to work with the sign on the side of your car or your truck, or, you know, I mean, uniforms, and on and on and on. That's building a corporate identity. And then you decide, well, I'm going to design a brochure that tells everybody what I do. And you print the brochure and you distribute it, and you go, wow, this is going really nice. But you know what? I don't have a presence on the web. So I want my website to sort of have the same feel as that I've designed here. Not sort of. I want it to look like this. I want my logo to look the same. I want the colors to look the same. I want the layout to look the same. And so if you've already designed a brochure, or you've designed something for your company, that maybe you can adapt that to the web. And that's what you would do. You would design, it's already designed in Photoshop. Let's go ahead and slice it up and add the links and do whatever to it, and now turn it into a website, so that there's continuity between print and the web. That's what you want to establish, continuity. That's all a part of the corporate identity. You know, it's Coca-Cola. It's, you know, you think of how they spent, I had George Gaw was really an incredible designer, and I had him in one of my first design classes as an art student. And he worked, I forget for what design company at the time, and they were, Coca-Cola was their client, and they were, was when they went from the old scrolly kind of Coca-Cola to Coke, and it was a serif, a block serif, and now they use both. I mean, they always use both, and then they defined that red, because for Coca-Cola, they must have spent 6 months deciding what red to use. You know, and that's consistent, and they're very, just like the formula for Coca-Cola, it's very precise. Even down that if you were to buy those green bottles, that green in there is probably locked under some vault or something to be able to make that exact appearance, so that it all looks the same in uniform. You know, down to the color on the trucks and the uniforms that the people wear and stuff. So that's all we're trying to do on the web, and that's why I designed the class, is to try to adapt and say, okay, this is what we've done in print. How can we make what we've done in print work on the web? So for myself, knowing Photoshop, this is what I would probably want as a designer. You know, it shows off my design skills. It looks visually rich. It's unique. It won't take long. But here, let's look over here for a minute. See. 20 seconds. And that would be 56K. So if we look here, let's go back under Dreamweaver preferences. And let's switch from 56K to at least 128 kilobytes per second. That's still slow. 9 seconds. So for most people, it's going to fall under that 10-second rule. So it looks graphically rich. You know, you've got not just, it's not plain. Because you know, visual person, I want to see visuals, you know, more images and less text. If you're a writer, I suppose it doesn't matter. You know, you don't need all those images. You would want the text. So does that help you guys with the layout stuff, giving you options? Which direction to go? I suggest you start simple and build the content so that at least it works. And then you can create a new page and you can cut and paste the content into it as you decide and whether you're going to use AP divs and or tables and where they're going to go, and then just paste the content in there. And then you substitute one page for another when you're done. Just by renaming the pages, and that will, all the links will work, but be careful. How much time have I used? Let me see how much time I have left on my video camera. 23 minutes. Here, let me switch to one of these other pages. That looks horrible. They all look horrible now. Since I've started with AP divs, let me go ahead and do this. There's just a couple of common features that I wanted to talk about, and I guess now would be as good a time as any. If you want to insert a date, because one of the features in web design we talked about early on when I was telling you the basic principles to think about, or when that website was last modified. So let me go ahead and go back to layout, and I'm going to create a div here just to have a place to put it. That's all. So I'm going to go back to common, click inside it, and I'm going to select the date. And it gives me an insert option. And you see the different formats. So if I like March 7th, 1974, you can specify no day, or you can specify whether you want it Thursday, whatever day of the week. How detailed do you want this to be? Let's just say no day, March 7th, 1974, and we don't want a timestamp either. And the next one would be update automatically on save. So now when I click OK, it puts the date in here. Notice that it's using the computer to insert the date. And every time I change and I edit this page now, every day, it will automatically update that date. So you can put in here, type, add a little bit of text, last modified, and it will automatically insert the date. That can be a very nice feature. Okay, so that's very easy to do. There's also something called anchors. What anchors are used for typically is that, remember we talked about scrolling, that no one wants to scroll left and right, but it's okay to scroll top to bottom. There are some websites that are comprised of a single page. And the only thing that I don't like this, by the way, but what they do is that when you click on, you think you're clicking on another page, all you're doing is you're clicking on an anchor that's at the bottom of the page. And that's what these are. So for example, let me go ahead and create an anchor here. I'm going to click up here. I should have used something different. Now I got to create it. I'll put it in here. What the heck? I'm going to move this up here. This is my date. And I'll put in here bottom, B-O-T-T-O-M, because I want this to go to the bottom of my page. I'm going to, there, okay? So now in here, I guess I will have to, I'm going to go way down here. Okay, and I'm going to now insert an anchor. And the anchor name is going to be bottom. And it leaves that little anchor there. Okay? And while I'm down here, I'll put some text, and it will say, bottom of page. Now let's go back up. Notice how much I have to scroll, and now I'll highlight this. And now I can put a link in here. And I can look here, and you'll see there's nothing. I can only go to other pages at the moment. But because I know that, I can put that I've added an anchor. I put pound bottom. Okay? And notice it reads it as a link, just like I had already formatted it using CSS. So now watch what happens when we save it and we preview it in the browser. And when I click here, it takes me down here. And you can have an anchor down here that takes you back up. But for really lengthy pages, it's not a bad idea to have anchors. So we've added dates and added anchors. I think that's enough for one day. Some of the other things that I want to talk about are, I wanted to look, and maybe you'll have to do this on your own because I've used up too much time today. Look at some of the templates that are available to you and explore them and deconstruct them in Dreamweaver. The other thing that I want to cover are templates. Now, you can create your own templates in Dreamweaver, which can be really useful. And it's more for you as a designer than when you're going to hand your website over to somebody else. That, for example, maybe you have designed an in-house document that will be a weekly newsletter that will be distributed to everybody in the company. Okay, that you'll go online and you'll see this online newsletter. And the person who's editing the content doesn't know anything about web design. Well, you as the designer, what you can do is you can create a template, and it locks everything in place. And then you can determine as you build this template, that there are only certain regions that are editable. Because from week to week, it's only the content that changes. It's not the header. It's not the overall layout or design. Right? So that when you hand this over to the person that's going to edit the content, the only thing they can do is cut and paste and exchange the content, and then they can upload it or hand it back to you or whoever, but they can't modify the design in any way. They're not allowed to. And that can be really useful. So templates from that standpoint can be really useful for a designer, particularly if you're a designer who has to maintain a website on a weekly or daily or monthly basis, and you hand part of it over to a client, and maybe you've done that and they've really goofed it up, and now you have to go back. It will take hours, maybe days, to reconstruct it, to rebuild it, make it work. That if you give them a template, then you fix that problem. That's one of the things. The other things are behaviors. Learn how to create pop-up windows. If you want to also create rollovers, slideshow rollovers. Somebody asked me about slideshow rollovers the other day. That when you roll over in one place, something else changes over here, which is kind of cool. Just using JavaScript and HTML to do that. It's all built in to Dreamweaver. So you don't have to do it in Flash or anything, and it's compatible with pretty much all browsers now. So those are a handful of things that I still want to show you. I don't think I'm going to talk about frame sets this year. I don't know anybody that uses them anymore. I used to get people always wanting to use them, and they're just a nightmare. And I don't know of anybody that uses them anymore. But they're still around as a legacy. That I believe that that's what they use. At least they used to at Tripod. So some of you were wondering why your Flash project wouldn't show properly when all the files lied outside of it. Were outside of it. When you clicked on it, even though the files were there, it didn't know where to go. Because frame sets look like tables, but in fact they're separate. They're separate pages held together by a frame. And so what Tripod does, it puts its ad in the top frame and the bottom frame, and it puts your web page in the main frame and the middle frame. So if you don't specify and they don't tell you what frame it's being put into your website. So when it clicks on it and it's looking for a particular place, it doesn't know where to place the image from Flash. Things can get really goofy. So it's better not to even show you that. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything about it. But you really can live without them. You can in this day and age. If we do have time towards the end, maybe I'll find something on Linda or something, just have him talk about it so you know about it, and that's about it. Okay? So is everybody set for the rest of today? Sort of. You can take a break if you want.
Could you go over the tasking Excel sheet one more time?
Sure. Start from scratch, from blank. Okay, let me turn off the video and then we'll just do this again.